Hello and welcome to today's lesson on the lowest common multiple. To start today, we're going to review the work that we covered last time, which was on the highest common factor. So I'd like you to start with, if you can't remember this, you can go back and look at my previous video on the highest common factor, which is available. If you can remember how to do that, I would like you now to draw a prime factor tree and then a Venn diagram to help find the highest common factor for 30 and 75. So press pause, have a go. When you've come up with your answer and all your workings, make sure they're in your book written down, then press play again and we'll go through and check you've got that right. Press pause now. Okay. So for this we start by drawing our prime factor trees. So we've got 30 and you may have chosen different factors to me, that's absolutely fine. There we go, that's 30. So I can say that 30 as the product of primes is 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 5, and 75 I'm going to go for 25 and 3 again, and 5 and 5. I'd forgotten actually to circle my primes at the end because that helps me to see when I've finished on a branch. There we go, and I can write that 75 is equal to 3 multiplied by 5 squared. Remember, it's 5 squared because of the 5 multiplied by the 5. So if you've written 5 multiplied by 5 here, that's absolutely fine as well. And actually, in some ways, for finding the highest common factor, it's slightly easier. So let's look at the things that are the same in both of them. Have I got a 2 in both of them? So have a look. Have I got a 2 here? Have I got 2? No. Have I got a 3? Yes, I have got a 3 in both. So I'm going to circle my 3 there and my 3 there to help me see it. Notice that I'm using different colour pens. It does help. And okay, I'm now on to the 5, and I've got a 5 in both, and that's it. So I'm now going to go on and I'm going to draw my Venn diagram. So I'm going to push my page up. I draw my box. And some of you may go, well, I don't need to draw the Venn diagram, but it is good practice teaching you all of those skills. This one is I'm representing 30 and this is 75. I'm going to underline them so I know that they're the titles. And then I'm going to put 3 and 5 in the centre because they're the numbers that are in both. And on the 30, here is my 2, and in the 75, there's my 5. And my highest common factor is equal to 3 multiplied by 5, which is where my circles overlap. So this is where they intersect, and this equals 15. So my highest common factor is 15. And just checking, 15 is a factor of 30 and 15 is a factor of 75. So I can even just do that check and think it through so that I know my answer should be correct. It's important that we review our answers before we move on. If you got 15, big well done. If you didn't, go back, review all of this so that you can see what perhaps went wrong before you move on to the next stage. We find the lowest common multiple. So, carrying on, definitions to start with, because I'm talking about the lowest common multiple, and I need to think first of all, what's the multiple and what's the lowest common multiple? So press pause, go and find out what is a multiple, what is a lowest common multiple. Try and think how you would describe them to someone, and then when you've written something down, press play and we'll see if you've got those correct. Okay, so first of all, the definition of a multiple is the result of multiplying a number by an integer. E.g., 1 multiplied by 2, 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, and so on. So often we talk about multiples being part of the timetables. So if I want the multiples of 3, that would be 3, 6, 9, 12. Notice 3 is the first multiple of 3. Often gets forgotten that. So the first multiple of 5 is 5, 10, then 15, then 20, carries on. So the first multiple of 33 is 33, and then it carries on, 66, 99. So they are multiple. That's the definition of a multiple. And now we want to look at the lowest common multiple. And the lowest common multiple is the smallest positive integer that is a multiple of 2 or more numbers. So I could, if I wanted the smallest multiple of 3 and 5, I would start with the number 3 and I would write my 3 times table out, and then I would write out my 5 times table underneath. Oh, I think I'm going to need another one there. And I'd notice that this is the first one that appears in both, and that's my lowest common multiple. And we've looked at that previously, but what we're going to do today is take it on to looking at the lowest common multiple of larger numbers, and a method for doing that using our knowledge of factor trees. So I'm asked here, using prime factor trees and Venn diagrams, to find the lowest common multiple for 30 and 75. So here I'm asked to find the lowest common multiple, but I've seen a question really similar to this before. And I want you to take you back to where we started at the beginning of this lesson. And I want us to go back to here. And here we found the highest common factor of 30 and 75. And what's changed in this question is the question has changed from the highest common factor to the lowest common multiple. But actually, I can use all of my work here to work it the lowest common multiple out. When I'm finding the lowest common multiple, I need to start by doing my prime factor tree for both of them. Well, I've already done that on this page, so I actually don't need to do that again. I can use my workings, which I'm hoping you've written down as well from before. I then draw out my Venn diagram, and here is my Venn diagram. And what I found was the numbers in here, where the two circles intersect, that's the two sets of numbers, because we call each of these a set. So where the two overlap, that was my highest common factor, which is 15. To find my lowest common multiple, and this is the new part now, I use this information here, which, if you remember, comes from that middle intersection box. So that's my 3 multiplied by 5. But I also include the values that haven't previously been used. Because when I write, if you write these down, we know that for it to be a multiple, it's going to have to be a multiple of 2 times 3 times 5, because 2 times 3 times 5 is 30. So it must be a multiple of those 3 numbers multiplied by together. It also must be a multiple of these numbers, which is 3, 5 and 3, 5 and 5, because 3 times 5 times 5 is 75. So it must be a multiple of these numbers as well. So if I include all of these, and I just include these once, because they are in both of them, and these numbers here, which appear in each of our numbers separately, I should end up with my lowest common multiple. And let's work out what that is. Well, 3 times 5, which remember is the centre part, multiplied by the 2 and the 5, gives me a total of 150. So is 150, let's do that check, a multiple of 30? Yes, if I do my 30 times table, I know that it's the 5th multiple. And 75, if I do my 75 times table, that's my 2nd multiple. So I actually, when I draw my Venn diagram, it gives me all the information. And just wanting to recap that, and I think you do need to press this video in a moment and pause and write all of this down. When we look at this, the thing that we want to make sure that we realise is this bit, the intersection, gives me the highest common factor. But if I look at everything that goes in all of these, I'm going to shade it in, that gives me my lowest common multiple. So that's the shaded in part. So it means that I need the 2, the 3, I need the 2, the 3 and the 5 only once, and the 5. And that gives me my lowest common multiple, all from one diagram. Right, press pause. Make sure you fully understand that. Go back, listen to it again. Make sure you're there before we move on. So let's check that we really do understand this. So I'm going to move on to a new question, because remember, this was the question I asked you, and we went back and we used our information from the beginning of the lesson, and we're now going to do a new one on our own. So I'm going to ask you to press pause now. First of all, I'd like you to draw out the prime factor trees, and then I would like you to put your information in a Venn diagram. And once you've done that, I want you to press play and check you've got it correct. So press pause now, and when you're finished, press play. Okay, so here's my workings. So for 12, you should have got 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3, and for 8, 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 3. And some of you may have written these in index form, so this here, just in case you have, because that would be brilliant, that would be 2 squared multiplied by 3, and here this would be 2 multiplied by 3 squared. And remember, we look for those things, those numbers, which are in both, and I found 2 and multiplied by 3 appears in both of these, and that's what goes here in the overlapping part of my circle. So this is where the 2 sets of numbers overlap. And so I'm then got 1 2 left over for 12, which goes in here, and 1 3 that's left over, which goes in there. So now I'm hoping you've got that. I'm going to actually ask you to do an extra part, because I think you're going to be brilliant at this. I want you to find for me what the highest common factor is, and I also want you then to find what the lowest common multiple is. So press pause again. When you've written down what your answers are, I want you to press play. Okay, I'm hoping that for the highest common factor, you've remembered from before, that would be where the intersection is. So we can write for that there, that's 2 multiplied by 3, and our answer is 6. Now the lowest common multiple, which is the new thing for this lesson. So here we would write down the part that is in the intersection that's found in both numbers. So these factors are found in both numbers, so we write those down to start with, and then we write down the parts that are only found in the individual numbers, and that would be then multiplied by my 2 and another 3. So the first parts, again, just going through that in red, are found there. And these parts in blue are taken from this 2 here and this 3 here. It just happens that they repeat. That's not always going to happen. It just happened in this example. And working that out, we have the answer of 36. Now, with both of those answers, we need to check before we just move on and go, oh, that's it, I've done that. Are these answers correct? Or do they seem like they should be correct? So my highest common factor is 6. Well, if 6 is a factor of both 12 and 18, it means when I divide 12 by 6, I should get an integer answer because that would mean it's a factor. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. That is an integer answer. It is a factor, so it's looking like it could be correct. 18 divided by 6 is 3. That's another integer answer. So yes, I can say that 6 is a factor of 12 and 18. So it's likely my answer is going to be right. Now for 36, if 36 is a multiple of 12 and 18, then 36 can be found in the 12 and the 18 times table. So I can look, and 3 times 12 is 36. It's the third multiple. That's good. And it's the second multiple of 18. Therefore, that is correct. Now, if there's anything there you're not too sure of, press pause, rewind the video, and make sure that you have fully understood that before you move on, because the next thing that I'd like you to do is answer some questions yourself. So here we go. There's 3 questions for you to answer. Press pause, have a go at those questions, and when you think you've got the answers correct, and remember, do that check at the end. Are these answers likely to be correct? Do they work? When you've done all that, press play, and I'll give you the answers. So here's our answers. 120 is the lowest common multiple of 24 and 60. Number 2 is 378 and number 3 is 210. If you've got any of those incorrect, go back, try to correct them. Make sure that there aren't any errors with your diagrams. Sometimes it's best just to start all over again and have another go. But make sure you do those corrections before you move on and do some further practice. If you're not too sure, go and find someone and ask them for some help. Well done.